Welcome to Grange Coventry Photographic Society. My name's Bob Johnston, for those that don't know. And today we're going to do our episode 2 of Back to Basics. So last time I talked about technique basically, although it was obviously, because it was only a short talk, fairly basic. But the thing is that technique is only part of what photography is about. And so tonight we're going to talk about something different, more about the philosophy of photography and, why we take pictures, how we should take pictures. David Bailey had an extraordinary, in one of his interviews, he said this: "It takes a lot of imagination to be a good photographer. You need less imagination to be a painter because you can invent things. But in photography, everything is so ordinary, it takes a lot of looking before you can learn to see the extraordinary." Well, I'm not sure it's entirely right, is it? But, however, you get what he's getting at. One of the wonderful things about photography is that we're always learning. So what I'm going to show you tonight is my own personal take on it, and you can put it in your mind or just dismiss it as you wish, but hopefully it might be of some help. I must point out that what I'm about to talk about is serious photography, for want of a better word. But the most important photography is not this kind of photography. It's the photographs you take of your friends, your families, and events in your life. Because that kind of photography is like a time machine. And those things are irreplaceable and they're very important. But nevertheless, what's in here might help you with that too. So there are two sides to photography, as I mentioned before. There's the technical side, which is necessary to master in order to interpret the other side, which is your heart. So you've got the technical side, which is your mind, the other side, which is your heart. After all, an artist has his techniques too, just the same, but his techniques are useless without, sorry Bailey, but without his imagination, they would be useless. Of course, I'm not suggesting that you should keep these principles in mind while you're actually taking a photograph. Obviously, when you're taking a photograph, it's intuition which you're using. But the way in which you take a photograph, your particular way in which you take a photograph, is the sum total of all your experiences in life. The films you've seen, the people you know, the things you're interested in, and they all feed into your head. And that is, that's very important. That's why your photographs are different to other people. Visual art and photography have their own language. And the basis of this is the interrelationship between subject, form, and content. Now, subject is not what you think. Subject is not what's in front of the camera. It's what's, you can also call it intent. I remember when the Royal Photographic Society brought in a ruling that when you apply for your associateship or your fellowship or whatever, you have to have a statement of intent. And at first I thought, oh, what a load of rubbish. And then when I thought about it, you have to have an intent. How could you have a body of work without some idea behind it? So that's your meaning. That's the intent behind it. And then the content is what's in the frame. And the form is how you put it over. So that's your composition, the shutter speed you choose, what tones are in the picture, whether it's high key or low key or whatever. So you've got these three things: subject, content, and form. I don't know what the next one is. Of course, in some cases, the subject and the content are the same, really. It's like this is really sort of an abstract photograph. The subject or content in this, well, I'm just saying, isn't this an interesting thing to look at? No more than that, really. So not every picture has a really powerful content, but it could have. In this case, a similar thing. This is an abstract of a locomotive in motion. So I suppose you could say in this case the subject is to show the power and speed of the locomotive, and the content is this picture which is being used, the form is a long exposure to show the motion. But you shouldn't confuse the subject with content, though. They are actually two different things. So this one, again, you see, this one. This sort of thing is usually lost on club judges because, well, we know what they're like or can be. Some are good and they would understand, and some are not. So the intent of this photograph, or the subject of this photograph, is the contrast between life now and life as it was 5,000 years ago. So the content is this massive 5,000-year-old standing stone, and the van which is rushing past, and the form is well, apart from the fact I made it black and white, is the long exposure that I've used to show the blur in the van, which sort of represents the speed of life today. Anyway, sorry, I've got to page 2 now. Now, what to photograph? Everyone has that dilemma. It took me a long time to realise that to take a photograph, you do need intent. Some people can go out with their camera, you know, on their walk down through town or whatever, and they get pictures. I'm not that good. I can't really do it. I have to have an idea, even if it's just what an interesting place this could be to photograph. You know, I have to have some objective to do it. Personally, that's my personal thing. Always take pictures of things you're inspired by or you're interested in. I don't very often show pictures of aircraft because I realise that not everyone's interested in them. But I love aviation, and so, you know, I take lots of pictures of those. And I'm very interested in prehistory, stone circles, as you know, that sort of thing. This is the Rollright stones. These stones here look really big because I've used a wide angle lens I've got down low, but actually they're only about 3 foot tall. Which is another thing, you see. What I've done there is that I've used the form I've used is to show the stones in a way in which they perhaps wouldn't normally be seen. So anyway, so everything in the picture should add to your intention. It is possible, of course, to find intention afterwards. I mean, you might take a lot of pictures and then you're looking through them and you think, oh, I like doing that, don't I? I like having people in this position, or I like, you know, you might see some sort of form taking shape. Black and white. There's no doubt that black and white can be important in photography, and there's no doubt that colour can be very important in photography. I know these days I take quite a lot of colour pictures, but I used to be black and white all the time. But you have to know how to convert properly into black and white, which is a technique thing, of course, and which image to do it to. I was judging somewhere recently, and somebody had converted, I can't say too much about it, but somebody had converted a picture into black and white that clearly should have been in colour. And not only that, they'd made it so, for example, there were some important things in there that would have been green, and they were the same shade of grey as everything else. So it just didn't work. Now, if he'd, in the old days when we used film, we would have put a green filter on, but nowadays you do it afterwards in Lightroom or whatever you're using like that. And you can, when you convert to black and white, you can emphasize the green tones. But anyway, there you are. And even in cameras now with JPEGs, they generally have that. So in mine, it'll have a black and white conversion, then it'll have one with green filter, yellow filter, red filter, whatever. And you can, nowadays, when you look on your camera with modern mirrorless cameras, it will show you a black and white image if that's what you want. In the old days, we had film, we had to imagine what it was like. We didn't know how it was going to come out. So it's so easy nowadays, really. Do you remember the old 625 line analog TV? And the way that worked was most of the bandwidth, because there wasn't much bandwidth, went into the black and white, and a very small amount of the bandwidth went into the colour. And if you ever looked at the colour channel without the black and white channel, all you would see is these smudges, like somebody had got like a kid had got a brush and just gone dab, 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 dab. You know, all the definition is in the black and white. So tones, the choice of where to put tones. I don't know whether I should be going on to the next one or not. Tones, the choice of where to put the tones helps to create the mood and the atmosphere in the picture. So, for example, in this one, so first of all, we have the darks, the shadows. So obviously this is a picture which depends very much on the darks. And in fact, there are areas in this picture where the blacks are totally black. And people will tell you should never do this, but the reality is, yeah, it's true. If a shadow becomes totally black, there's no information in it, and it can become, how would I put it, there appears dead areas. But of course, this was a nighttime picture. This was taken, this is really not just taken by me, because there were two people light painting this while I was pressing the shutter. They had torches, and they would light paint the stones, and of course it took about 6 or 7 attempts to get it right. But the great thing nowadays, again, is you can see whether it's right or not afterwards. If it'd been film, I don't know how you would have done it, really. It would have been much harder. Now, the other example of this is, oh, and here, for example, in this picture, I had to, it's completely lost in the screen because there's too much light on it, but there were areas of this where I had to raise the value of the shadows because there was important detail in there. But if they're too light, they will lose the atmosphere of mystery. And that's what's wrong with, if you've seen these HDR pictures of interiors where people, they go into church and they use high dynamic range, which is another technique. And it just doesn't look right, because when you look at the interior of that church, there are shadows, there are dark areas. If you completely eliminate them, it just looks artificial. Now, digital cameras do have a habit of crushing the shadows and making them look muddy. So you have to bear that in mind if you're working from RAW. And also in the shadows is where the noise will happen. But with modern cameras and software, that's much less likely nowadays to cause you a problem. Then, of course, we've got the midtones. Now, here's a fairly high key picture. Most of the information is in the midtones and in the lower lights. But this is where the meat of the picture is. This is where the three-dimensionality and emotion comes from. It's in those midtones, those very important midtones. If there's a large percent of darker midtones, you get the darker, moody emotion. If there's more, if the midtones are more prominent, then we get something like this. And then, of course, and here's a case of we've used, again, where I've used darks or shadows. I've used, this is a low key, what you call a low key picture. This is a comparison with music, of course, low key and high key. Low key gives us that mood, and high key gives us a different kind of mood altogether. So this is light and airy. This is the interior of the cathedral in Reykjavik, the nave of the cathedral Reykjavik. So the lights, or the highlights, they give us the life, the sparkle, that kind of a mood. But if they blow out, if they're completely white, then like the shadows, they lose life. There are just dead areas. However, of course, there's always an exception to that, you know. I mean, like that. I mean, obviously, you can't do anything. The sun is the sun, and it's always going to be like that, and it's going to look like that to the eye as well. So there are exceptions. The sparkle of sunlight on water, that will be completely white. But in general, if you were taking a picture like this, you would expose to make sure that those light areas there could be reproduced as sort of light grey, if you like. Oh, here's another low-key picture. Again, you know, I wanted to emphasize the sky, I wanted to emphasize the rain that was coming on, and general. I think, to me, nature, I mean, people think, well, it's useful to us all to go out into nature, into forest or whatever, and it does improve your mental health, doesn't it? But there's another side to nature, and it's harsh, and it can kill you. And I always, you know, try to put that over, or very often try to put that over. Here's a guy. This is a sort of, whoops, this is a sort of a illustration of something. Now, this, it's more, it is just about apparent, sorry, it's a bit, but this guy was struggling through the snow, as you can see. This is in my recent visit to Iceland, and I thought it made quite a good picture. But the question is that the right thing, or is that the right thing? You see, when I printed it, it was more like that. But the reality is that actually it should appear darker than that, really. It's quite bright on the projector. Is more how it really was as you're getting towards dusk. So again, you make that choice. It's an artistic choice, if you like. It's just a choice that you must make. Quick talk about dynamic range. When we're taking, particularly landscapes, we often have the difference between the very light tones and the very dark tones is more than we can reproduce. On a monitor, in ideal conditions in darkness, it can manage about 9 stops. On a print, 6 to 8 stops at the most. But colour negative film could do 13 stops, but you couldn't necessarily reproduce that on the print. So the tones have to be compressed. Now, when you take a picture in your camera, the processor in the camera will compress them according to what it thinks is right. And that's where what your JPEG comes out as. It's been processed in the camera. Nowadays, you can make many choices in the camera as to how that happens. Different kinds of films, different kinds of looks. But the great thing about taking pictures in RAW format is that you can make all those decisions afterward. But that's why, because those tones are compressed, that's why we need to be able to touch up a photograph, to dodge and burn, make bits lighter, make bits darker. We have to compress it into the what the paper can reproduce. Now, framing. Okay, so Gary Winogrand said, photography is about finding out what can happen in the frame. When you put 4 edges around some facts, you change those facts. People talk about photography as if it was straight or if it was real, and it never is. I mean, just the very act of putting something inside a frame changes it straight away. We select and alter what we see. So composition, now there are all sorts of rules, so-called rules of composition, which ought to be broken, really. But what it's really about is that this is form, this is part of form, and it's one of the major components of form. And so it's important how we arrange things in the frame in order to lead the eye of the viewer to the subject. But the most important thing is to leave out what we don't need in the picture. You must leave out what doesn't add to the picture. And that's a thing that mistake that people make all the time, you know. And when you look at your when you look at your picture when you look at your in the viewfinder, don't forget to look in the background, because this is how you get ant flow with the lamppost growing out of a hedge, you know. You don't really want that, do you? So you've got to look at the background. You've got to look around the edges. Is there anything around the edges that shouldn't be there? You know, that sort of thing. So that's what you're trying to do. So this is sort of an unusual composition that I made once. And this is much more standard one, really. But it's very important. If you take a picture like this, I'm actually waffling now. If you take a picture like this, it's very important where you place everything, and you have to be very accurate. Everything must be just right. that lamppost there, if I'd have moved slightly that way, it would have been growing out of this headstone, and that wouldn't have worked. If I'd have moved either way, this would have not been symmetrical, if you see what I mean. Very important to get your horizon straight. Everything has to be just so. The chapel needed obviously to come in between the two mountains, but anyway, anyone could do it. I was lucky to be there. Yeah, that was in Norway, that one. Here's another one that I know you've seen these before, by the way, the members of the club here, but you know, I don't actually take that many. So this one has a classic S curve, which is something in composition which works very well. And of course, I had to wait for the car to be in the right position, because without the car, it becomes rather boring, I think. You know, the car makes the picture, but it must be in the right place. Here, this is an infrared picture actually, but it doesn't matter. It's just the composition we're talking about. You see how I've placed the tree there, right in the centre of the open gate. So I open the gate, because if it was closed, your eye wouldn't want to go, because it's open, it's sort of beckoning you into the picture. So everything has to be arranged just right. It's interesting actually. I'm mixing this up a bit because it's not necessarily my in my notes in this order. But the thing is, with composition, is I say you have to be precise. So what a lot of people do is they use a tripod. I've probably used a tripod here, and a tripod is a great thing to use, but it's important to use it the right way. Don't get your tripod out straight away. Grab your camera, move around, go down, go up, go left, go right. Find out where that composition is. Then put your tripod up at the correct height in that place. If you know, I see people do it all the time. They get the tripod out, they put it up like that, head height somewhere, and that's it. Won't do, you see. You've got a, you know, a tripod is a help, but it can be a hindrance. Don't know what else we've got in here. Oh, don't know what that's for. Oh, colour, yeah, probably. Of course, the thing is about colour is that we, as photographers, we can't change it in the same way that a painter could. But nowadays, actually, you can do an awful lot. You can do an awful lot more now than you used to be able to in the days of colour film. You can change colours in a picture. This is what's called a pseudo crater. It's formed by mud that bubbles up from underneath. The magma underneath heats the water and mud, and it bubbles up. So this thousands of years ago, this thing was created. Now, it's very blue, isn't it? And I've left it that way. It was very blue because the sky's blue, you see, and so the snow will reflect that blue light. And I've left it blue because it's cold. It was cold, actually. It was very cold. And I've left that little tree in on the right-hand side there. That's a nice composition element. And then you've got the pathway going up to the. And here's another one I spotted. So this is just something unusual. You know, just keep your eye out. And I thought the reflection being so warm against the cold of the rest of the picture made an interesting picture. But you notice how I haven't put the window on its own in the middle. It works better like that. It's very hard for me to say why exactly, but it does. We read from left to right in the Western world, so that's part of it, I think, part of the reason. Right, okay. Well, I'm not sure that I'm getting this in order, but it doesn't matter. I'll get the general gist of it, you know, so you have to forgive me. So people, I mean, I've talked about landscape mostly because it's what I do a lot, but the reality is that landscape can be very boring. It has to have something to lift it. It has to have something special. You know, a general sort of landscape is all right if you just want to remember where you were on holiday. But if you want to impress other people, well, let's face it, we take pictures for ourselves. That's the number one thing. But this is a language, and we wouldn't be here today if we didn't want to impress other people with our pictures. We want other people to see them. So it's important to have that extra thing. Now, this is a bit of colour as well, isn't it? You see here, because this lady's got a shopping bag on her head. It was really poor. This is Coventry. It was pouring with rain, and I was photographing in the rain, you know. And just the other side of the two girls there was I don't know whether it's still there, but there's a sort of there's a phone box without any door on. And I could just stand inside this phone box and keep perfectly dry and just photograph people as they went past. So, but in general, people are more interested in people actually than they are in landscapes, you know. Here's one. This picture, I think I'll just make it up as I go along now. This picture probably doesn't have any intent really. It's just a look at me, aren't I interesting picture. Because it's an abstract. This picture is a sunset. Now, of course, the thing about sunsets is that once you've seen one, you've seen them all. So you've got to have something of interest. Now, of course, I was very lucky here. I mean, I was in a place in Tuscany, which, you know, you can't go wrong really. But as the sun went down, this is what it presented me with. So I do see people, they show sunsets or sunrises, and there's nothing in there apart from the clouds. You know, you've got to have something in the foreground to give it depth and to give your eyes something to look at. This one's infrared. Now, infrared is something special, to be fair. You can do it with a lot of cameras by putting an infrared filter on the front of the camera. Cameras vary as to how well that works. But the problem is, because very little light then is reaching the sensor, you probably need to put the camera on a tripod, or at least use a very, very high ISO. So I use a camera that's been converted for infrared. But this was in Derbyshire. And this is Compton Verney. This is taken in Compton Verney, which is only down the road. And I go there a bit, and I struggle to get pictures there that are anything special, but there was this one. And I have to admit that the cloud was there and the moon was there, but the cloud was not actually in that position. This is one I took in Sri Lanka. It wasn't a photographic holiday really, but you couldn't blame it. What a place, you know. But what's happening here is this lady is teaching the girl about Buddhism and the temple and all the rest of it. So I suppose the intent of this picture is to show the wisdom of old age and how youth can benefit from it. A portrait of a guy. He was a baker. This is in Italy, and he came out to have his fag, you know. And I couldn't tell you what it is now, but I think I memorised the Italian for "Could I take your picture, please?" which he probably laughed when I said it. And anyway, no problem, you know, yeah, take your picture. It's amazing, people, you know, it is. I'm included that I can be nervous about taking people's picture, but 9 out of 10 people quite flattered by it, and they don't mind you doing it. This lady was in Liverpool, and I did ask her if I could take a picture, and I did give her some money. But you know, I mean, you've got to ask. I mean, if you're this close to people, you've got to ask, really. Obviously, you can take pictures of people when they're not aware, like the people that were walking past in the rain. But if you're going to take a portrait like this, then you've got to ask. This is the only one in here, I think, which is not mine. So hopefully Joel Merriwitz won't mind. But isn't it amazing if you could take a picture which asks more questions than it answers that says, what is this about? Is this guy just hit him with a hammer? Or is he just sort of stepping over him to help him? What's everyone looking at? Why don't they do something? Has the guy in the bike run over him or what? What's happening here? And I think this is just amazing. Of course, Joel Merowitz he's very old now. He's about 86 or something like that. Still taking pictures. He's a master, of course, of street photography. You could use this technique on the street, which is actually panning with people. It was dusk, getting towards dusk when I did this, so it wasn't any problem getting a long enough shutter speed. But if you might need a neutral density filter to cut down the light on your camera in order to do it. Then there's animals, of course. Everybody loves animals. So these are the lovely Icelandic horses. And you see what I've done here is I've got the dark one and the light one. It took a while to get it. It's like it's the contrast between the two that makes the picture. Then you could always, there's no such thing as bad light. It's just a case of you have to adapt. So you go out and it's dull, so why not take close-ups? You know, take some close-ups. So this is some lichen on a rock. This was taken in the same trip, I think. Was up in Scotland I was. Some rocks, you know, that sort of thing. Look up, look down. Don't necessarily just take everything from head height sort of thing. So here I'm looking up, and this is obviously London, and this sort of picture has been done many times before. But you know, this is the thing to do, is to vary what you're doing a little bit. You could, so here we've got Godafoss. It's obviously a waterfall, but you could go in close instead. Just so select something from it, which probably makes a more interesting photograph in some ways. So, you know, go wide, go long. This is in Bradgate Park, and it looks a fairly boring picture, doesn't it? But if you give it the right treatment, you see. So this is the point about this is that you make a picture. You don't take it, you make it. Now, actually, this would be very difficult to do in camera. You'd pretty much have to do this afterwards. But, you know, obviously I've tweaked the sky and I've made it into black and white, and I've made it from something that looks fairly bland to something that looks dangerous, you know, more impressive. This is the original shot. This is what I went to Stonehenge. You can go into Stonehenge, into the inside of Stonehenge, but you have to apply, and they only allow so many people, and it cost at the time about £60. It's probably more than that now, but because I'm interested in stone circles, it was worth it for me. So I took this picture, and I mean that's it, right? So that's what I made it into. It's the same picture. Exactly the same picture. I had to expose for the lights, for the light tones, but then in the post-processing, I stepped up I increased the shadow tones and made them lighter, and I obviously exaggerated the colours in the sky a bit as well. In fact, it may be a bit over the top, but you know, it just shows you what you can do. Or you could do something like this. Now here, I've actually added grain. People say, oh, you know, get rid of the grain, get rid of the noise. Not necessarily. It adds atmosphere, can add atmosphere. That was in Norway somewhere. Make a triptych. Why bother with just one picture? You could make a book, but make a series, you know. And I took a lot of these. It was in London. I took a lot of these. And obviously I thought, well, they make it it's more interesting to see them several together than it is to see them just as one. So I've got the blue one in the middle, you know, and the gold ones on the outside. Use different shutter speeds. So this is Hisley Bridge in Dartmoor, and if you took this at, you know, 2/50th of a second or something, it would be, the water looked very static. So I took this, I can't remember, you know, it probably about 1/8 of a second. That'd be, and your camera would have to be on a tripod. So about 1/8 of a second. It's only a picture of a bridge, but it makes it a bit more interesting. And the water, the highlights in the water, make diagonals which lead your eye towards the bridge. Go out at night, do some light painting. This one was relatively recent. I went to the Rollright Stones, which aren't very far away. It's a bit awkward to get to, but they're not that far away. I did some light painting on this. These stones are called the Whispering Knights. I expect the exposure was probably around 20 seconds, 10 or 20 seconds. Relatively wide angle lens. So that means that the stars are moving, or actually it's the Earth that's moving, of course. But depending on how long your lens is, you can take a relatively long exposure and they won't show, the streaks won't show. So this was probably taken with about a 14mm lens. Always look for atmosphere. This is very, if I did this again, I'd try and extend this. I had to sort of crop it on the right-hand side because there was stuff on the right-hand side which wasn't doing anything for the picture. That's probably the last one. So, you know, tips. Shoot it now. Never say, I'll come back. If you see something really good, it's usually when you're in the car, isn't it? You're going to an important appointment and you see a fantastic picture and you think, I'll come back and do that. When you come back, it won't be the same. So you have to do it, you know, while it presents itself. No such thing as bad light. I've done that one. Beware of harsh light and people. If you want to take a portrait of somebody in the street, for example, and the sun's shining, you really want to take them into maybe into a doorway or somewhere like that, because the harsh light will look bad on their face and it will make them squint. You know, you need some gentle lighting. Light is what makes your picture and gives it form, gives it 3D. So always be aware of the light. It's very important. Now, this is something I see all the time. I go to some clubs to do judging in that, you know, and people over sharpen their pictures. They sharpen them to the point where you could cut your fingers on the image, and it doesn't look right. It doesn't look. We don't see the things that sharply with our eyes, and it just looks false. And the other thing is, don't do as I do. Do as I say. Don't oversaturate your colours, like I did with the Stonehenge picture. You see these pictures, and they're very popular on social media, and they're like the colours are just ridiculous. You know, be a bit more subtle. Don't give yourself too many choices. Carry less gear. You know, if you go out with your camera bag and you've got 2 cameras, 5 lenses, a tripod, and you'll never take a picture. It's much better to go on a restricted, you know, strict amount. Take a camera and a couple of lenses. You know, that's all you need. And learn from your failures. That's very important. You know, when you come to edit your pictures, mine included, most of them rubbish, you know, but look at them and think, how could I have improved that? It's actually more important to look at your failures than it is to look at your successes, really. And look at other people's pictures. Go to exhibitions, go online, look at people's pictures, and see what styles you like and see what you can appreciate in those pictures. And look at painting. You know, don't have to just look at photography. Look at art. And be curious. Always be curious, you know. That's the key to it, really. And take things that you are curious about. So that's about it, I think. I don't know how long I've taken, but that's about it. Thank you for watching our video. And if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, because this will help us no end. And this is from the Grange Photographic Society, Coventry. Thank you.